Hello and welcome to the third and the last part of our video series for the acceptance of wind turbines. And now we would like to consider what are the arguments, what are the ways people argument against wind turbines here in Germany. And we already have seen in the last video that about 12% of public is willing to demonstrate against wind turbines. And this opposition is very well organized and generates a public presence that is clearly overestimated when we compare how many people do not have anything against wind turbines. And there are many small operating citizens initiatives, and they have something kind like an umbrella organization, and that is called the Bundesinitiative Vernunftkraft e.V. Already the name has the name reasonable inside shows a bit how serious that can be taken. They claim that in Germany we have over 1,000 initiatives and associations that have formed against the expansion of wind farms and wind turbines. Then the European Energy Transition Community, they had a closer look to all those 1,000 initiatives, and they actually found that it is really active. It's only 290. Nevertheless, 290 is still a big number, but far away from those 1,000 initiatives. And when we have a closer look to that, we see that websites, for example, of one initiative is just a copy of the other one. So the amount of initiatives that are real alive is much smaller than quite often published. How do those opponents speak? What is their rhetorics? They always argument emotionally close to home, and therefore they appeal to the conservatives in the public. They use wording like fidgeting electricity or scrap electricity that needs to be disposed somewhere else in other countries. And there we already see how negative the wording is, but also how far away from scientific language they use. But nevertheless, they are able to create emotions against wind turbines. And then they use the partly diffuse, partly real fears of the persons, and they take them up in order to subsequently instrumentalize them. And just one example we can find on websites is, for example, your green electricity makes me poor. So they try to connect different aspects that are not able to be connected. For example, the direct comparison of the expansion of wind power and old age poverty. Some argument would be that those Vernunftkraft people and of those local initiatives, they are, or they would claim that man-made climate change does not exist. That's not true. They are not really climate change deniers, but they have a very bad wording. And for those who it's very obvious that this wording is not really serious, they have another organization where they could hint to. And that is this EICE, this European Institute for Climate and Energy. The problem here is that institute in Germany is not a protected word, so everybody can form an institute or found an institute. So it's not definitely that it's a part of a university or a research organization. And also the word European Institute, it seems it's much bigger than it is, but it is a pure German institution. They even do not have an English-spoken website. And they are real climate change deniers. So they claim themselves the claim of a man-made climate change as not scientifically justable and therefore as a hoax against the population. They are financed by voluntary contribution from its members and donations, and the donators are not named on their website, for example. Another prominent opponent is from Bavaria, this Verein für Landschaftspflege und Artenschutz. And when we now look what do they have in common, then is that many are advocates of climate damaging energy use, so like coal lobby, for example. many, but not all, do not recognize the man-made climate change, and protagonists have excellent connection in German politics. The magazine for the European energy transition, they studied how all those organizations are interlinked together and which people are standing behind those organizations and how they have connections into the German government. And it's really horrible that even to the top level of the Ministry for Economic Affairs, they are connected. The ministry that has the role to drive the energy transition, there we also find the opponents for the energy transition. When we look to the arguments of the opponents, and then in the order from the maximum to the least, they quite often bring nature conservation as a main argument, then emissions coming from wind turbines, the optical appearance. They question the purpose of wind turbines and put also as argument the finances and distance regulations and so on. And in the end we have a look to some reports in television, and there, for example, we have in the news, in the first German television, a report on 3 wind turbines in Ostbevern, and there we find people saying something like they fear to lose their scenic homes, and also quite typical that guy who says, I have been a green voter since the very beginning. I think wind power is an excellent alternative, but not in this size and not in this area. So it is typical this, not in my backyard. I'm a pro renewable, but not in my backyard. Or another one says, fear of horses, this is not the right place. Other fears are quite often dedicated to the economic loss. For example, the fear that tourism will go backwards. And then also quite important sentence, but also pointing out a solution for these opponents. A lady that says, the land use plan has been decided for years. So it was planned for a long time that wind turbines will be built. Back then, some of them were in favor of it because they thought that a community wind farm would be built and that they would share the profits. That's off the table. And so now they became from for wind energy to against wind energy. And there we see when we take the people that they also profit from wind turbines, they become less opponent and they become for wind energy. Or another television report in the second German television, the battle for wind power. There again, this lady said, if they were planned somewhere else, that wouldn't be a problem, but not here, please. Or also quite interesting, and what we observe day by day, the stupid thing is that we as critics of this form of energy are forced to deal with ornithology because other things just don't work in Germany anymore. So they deal with birds and maybe problems wind turbines can cause to birds because they want just to hinder that a wind park is built there. So they are not really interested in the birds, and that is clear because I never have seen people demonstrating against cars or windows of buildings where by magnitude more birds die than in wind turbines. So it's just a way to get rid of wind park planning. And then she ends, it is actually ridiculous because people are not asked about. But that's not true. When we need to build wind parks, then we need to have acoustic expertise. That means we need to prove that the people are not harmed by acoustic noise of wind turbines. We need to have optical expertise, that the shadowing is not harming the people that comes from wind turbines. And even when we talk about collisions of birds and bats, that cannot be ruled out. Sometimes wind parks and turbines need to be stopped when they are close to. and nowadays we even have systems for recognizing birds and bats. And we need to have compensatory measures when somewhere a wind park is planned. And that shows how important it is to have measures to increase project-related acceptance on site. That from the beginning we need to have trust and transparency. That protection of people and nature is always part of a wind park planning process. That we have and need fair regulations in area planning, and maybe the most important at all, the participation and value creation on site, that the people have the possibility to participate financially from wind turbines. That is the strongest acceptance factor, like also this query shows here from FA Wind. They had been asking what would support the acceptance of wind in a community, and the top 5 or 6 was all related to money. So, and even more important than their own profit was that their community, that the village, they should be gaining money from those wind projects, or that the people are thinking that they should at least get a cheaper electricity tariff when they accept wind turbines near their home. People would like to be able to invest in the wind park project. That's a community wind park. And even more than half of the people said they would accept it even if the local utility would build the wind park, but not investors from somewhere outside. And then to finish with a positive sign of the active supporters, there we have seen at least 25% of the public are ready to demonstrate for, but they are not so locally, not only towards wind turbines oriented, and by that they perceive less public awareness in media, for example. And one of the biggest supporters of wind turbines, but not dedicated to wind turbines, but against climate change at all, for sure, is the very large Fridays for Future community. So thank you very much